Hello everyone, glad you could make it. Today, we'll be working on the high-grade Demi Trainer, the real mainstay of the Astakagia School of Technology. Returning viewers may recall that this is technically my second Demi Trainer, so the build isn't much of a surprise, but I think we can shake things up with the custom paint scheme. But we have to get to that point, so let's open the box and get to work. Inside the box are even less runners than on ChuChu's Demi Trainer, with 3 total and a sticker sheet. This kit is the epitome of how these Witch from Mercury kits go together. Really simple, but in the best way possible. So many pieces are single parts it's kind of insane, and the kit features extensive use of slide molds to achieve as much detail possible. It goes together super quickly and has a low part count, so it's perfect for a beginner. If you've built a Demi Trainer before, you can build one without looking at the instructions, it's that simple. If you're an experienced builder, you could probably build this without instructions even on your first go. The kit may not stick out as much when compared to the aerial or other designs, but it is a good one. I also think it makes for a great entry grade kit, even though it is part of the high grade lineup. It's simple enough for beginners but isn't repetitive, which can be the case with the entry-grade Gundams, as those designs have had previous iterations. It's also a perfect kit to army build, as it can be found for a low price and the simple design allows for lots of painting and scribing potential. There's a lot you can do with this kit. I primed with Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 and sprayed a coat of Tamiya TS100 semi-gloss bright gunmetal before painting. The blue you see is very different from the final blue, even though I'll technically be using the same exact color. This brings up a point regarding just how confusing painting can be, and why I try not to make definite statements on it, since so much can change even before you actually start. This bottle of Andrea Blue is far from ideal. Instead of the thick, concentrated color I expected, it came out thin and semi-translucent. Coverage-wise, the thinner consistency made the paint pull away from the edges. My best guess on why this happened was due to the paint sitting for a while without being shaken, which would explain the pigment separating. Now I've got a newer bottle of Andrea Blue and the difference is pretty noticeable. This color is one that caught my eye almost instantly when I saw it at my local shop. I've had the paint for several months now, and I'm glad I found a use for it. While painting on this blue, at least the newer bottle of it, I found the process super enjoyable, and the camera doesn't do it justice. This color is incredibly vibrant and painted on very well, taking the usual 3 coats to perfectly cover up the metallic undercoat. It's a lovely shade, although it's not my favorite blue paint for mixing up colors, it is my favorite as a standalone blue. But why blue, and this blue specifically? I wanted something bright and friendly. After all, the Demi Trainer is meant for training. Although the original color scheme is quite nice, it just doesn't seem like it would work for a machine used by inexperienced kids. This bright blue would help the suit stand out during exercises for safety purposes, especially if it got lost and had to be found with any equipment other than the human eye. This color has so much personality, and it'll really help the finished kit stand out from my other Witch from Mercury builds. I have talked about establishing color palettes, but types of color can also set different suits apart. Because while I have used bold colors before, like magenta and turquoise, they have some added gray tones which makes them subdued. I'm painting some of the pieces a very pale gray, just like on the official color scheme. Although silver gray is my favorite alternative to white, it's been a while since I've actually used it, which is why I'm using it for this build. Not only do I just miss working with this color, it'll help set it apart from the other pale grays I've worked with in this build series, even if the difference is super slight and virtually indistinguishable even when putting my builds right next to each other. Throughout this build series, I've used quite a few light grays. I've used white gray, sky gray, medium sea gray, and various mixtures of those colors. And now I'm using silver gray. Although these colors look very similar, they have different applications in my opinion. White gray is cold with some blue tones, which makes it the right choice in my opinion for the Ariel, which is high-tech and flies around a lot. For the Demi Trainer, which spends time on the ground and gets beat up during training, silver gray is better with its warmer tones. So far, this has just been a standard recolor, switching the pale green to a bright blue. I wanted to spice things up a bit and add some stripes. This bright green is another color I've been wanting to use for a while. For stripes like this, I don't need to mask, using the edges of the part to guide my brush. I feel like the addition of the green gives the color scheme that IBO feel. Before, it felt UC and was a pretty solid representation of the Robert Gilliam Zaku colors. But this green also sets it apart from my other Witcher Mercury builds. I'm keeping it restricted to the knees though, just so it won't be too distracting. I sprayed a coat of Mr. Super Clear Semigloss which I let dry for a while, around 6 hours. This is much longer than usual and only happened because I had stuff to do that day. Now I'm adding decals. This G rework set is very new, only being able for purchase for a week at time of recording. Big shout out to Midwest Hobbycraft for getting these to me so soon. I thought I would have to use Bandai's water slides again and wasn't expecting to see these just 3 days after placing my order. The set has decals for either the standard Demi Trainer or choo-choos, but if you're sparing, you can stretch it to have enough for both kits. The decal set really makes this kit shine, since the Demi Trainer is simpler. Recently, I've been using G Rework pretty much exclusively, especially for this build series since they're the only company making decal sets for these kits as they come out. Another thing I like about the G Rework decals is that they don't reuse anything. Each company's suits have different styles of markings which gives them all different personalities and just adds to the realism. It also just shows how much care goes into their design process. A lot of people recommend spraying a clear coat before applying decals to avoid silvering, which is when you can see the carrier film, but what you really need is a smooth surface. I've put decals over just paint and had no issues, especially with third-party decals from G Rework or Delphi, but the clear just makes things easier. After applying the decals, I'll use the paintbrush and just squeeze out all the trapped air bubbles. I let the decals dry and now I can start chipping. I'll start off doing general chipping all over the model, which helps establish things. It's also a great first chipping step since you don't need to think too much about it. All you do is get a pair of metal tweezers and use their natural spring to bounce them all over the paint. It's a very effortless way of doing things and is the most realistic chipping method out there. Now, I'm using my hobby knife to scrape at the edges of the kit and create some wear. In the name of realism and visual interest, I make sure not to scrape the paint off an entire edge, or make the edge wear perfectly symmetrical. You do need to be a little more careful here than with the tweezers, since you can scrape your way down to the primer or plastic. It hasn't happened to me yet, but there is always the possibility of it happening. To be safe, I try not to use the actual blade, but the side or back of it. Physical chipping usually is a technique that's on the subtle side and fully appreciated in person, but because I've used a darker metallic underneath some bright colors, it actually shows up on camera. Now, I'm using the knife again to chip up the decals. I focus on the larger ones, since the chipping will actually show up and just scrape at them until parts of the decal flake off, and I get a result I like. Compared to Bandai's decals which I just used on the Faract, the chipping process happened a lot quicker since there was less carrier film to remove. A lot of how I work comes down to experience, but one definite thing I can say is that you need to let the decals dry fully so you aren't moving the decals around as you hit them with your knife. I don't have any exact figures, but I like to wait around for hours. You could potentially speed up the drying process with a hairdryer or some other heat source, but I like to let the decals dry on their own. It's time for a pin wash. As usual, I'm working with a black acrylic wash, which I like due to it being water soluble. It's a very tedious process, but well worth it. When I paint on a wash like this, I make sure to use as fine of a brush possible, but as short of a brush possible. This helps reduce cleanup. With a fine brush, you can get in all the details easily, but a longer brush could flex on you and get paint where you don't want it. The Demi Trainer is a design that makes the pin wash go smoothly. There's some nice detail to highlight, but there aren't too many panel lines, which I find to be the most time-consuming part of a pin wash. A pin wash makes all the details pop out and adds a sense of dimensionality that just wouldn't exist without it. It's a game changer, and if you had to do a single technique to bring your kits to life, I'd go with the pin wash, even if chipping is a lot more fun. Black is the color I use most often just because it's the best color for shadows, but depending on your paintwork, you might have to switch things up a little. For example, if I painted the kit in an overall white, I'd be using a gray pin wash. It's a delicate balance of finding a color darker than your paintwork, but not too dark as to look cartoonish. I let the wash dry fully and now I'm doing a patina. It's important that the wash is completely dry because I'm using a wash for the patina and will be moving it around with a damp brush. If the pin wash was still wet, there's a pretty good chance that I'd be removing some of it while streaking down this paint. Not only does a patina instantly make a kit look weathered, it'll help to unify the various colors and just make everything seem more cohesive. I wanted some dust effects, so I'm doing the same thing, but with the dust colored acrylic paint, which I've thinned out, concentrated on the feet and lower legs. The final pieces to work on are of course the accessories. I'll start off by painting the shield blue, and when that's dry, do some scratches. I'll then do a grunge wash where I paint a wash all over a piece and wipe off the excess with a paper towel. It's a quick way to add a weathered effect, although it is less precise than a pin wash. But after this dries, I'll spray everything with a flat top coat and call it done. Here's the high-grade Demi Trainer in the bare plastic. And here it is after some work. I like how this one turned out. The brighter colors really make it pop and stand out from all my other witch builds. It's a fun contrast with Choo Choo's Demi Trainer, which has a very drab paint scheme. The kit itself is also just a nice build. I have the special edition Yaosobi version, so the kit may make another appearance. As usual, this isn't an explicit statement on how you should paint your own Gunpla, but a look into my own process. Feel free to use any colors or techniques to your own liking. Next, we're going to focus on accessories with both the Demi Trainer expansion set and the Mirasol flight unit for the aerial. It'll be a nice way to spice up some kits and add some customization. Thank you so much for watching. Consider supporting the channel if you can, and I'll be seeing you in the next video, whenever that is.